Yoya was known as the very first pioneer leader of the Agbowo Forum, a group connected to the Black Axe movement in Ibadan. Around the early months of 2014, when the group was beginning to gain structure in that environment, he naturally emerged as the man to guide it. The Agbowo Forum was based in an area that shared close boundaries with the University of Ibadan, which gave it a unique influence on both students and the community around the campus. What made Yoya stand out was not just the position he occupied but the personality he carried into leadership. He was a man in his mid-40s at the time, already mature in thought and experience, with a large physical frame that made him naturally command attention. Wherever Yoya went, his size and presence gave him an aura of authority even before he spoke. But unlike what many might expect from a man of such appearance, he was calm, deliberate, and believed more in dialogue than in confrontation. In a world where disputes could easily escalate into open clashes, Yoya carved a different path for himself and those he led. He was widely recognized as a man who preferred peace over violence, reasoning over chaos. Whenever tensions arose between his group and their rivals, Airlord's Confraternity, he would step in as a mediator, calming both sides and searching for a settlement that would prevent unnecessary damage. His ability to de-escalate conflict earned him great respect not only among his members but also among the rival groups, who came to see him as someone who valued stability above everything else. Throughout his time as leader, confraternity-related disturbances were noticeably absent in Agbowo. Unlike other areas where constant clashes were the norm, Agbowo remained relatively calm under Yaya's watch. Many would later describe this period as one of the most peaceful chapters in the history of the forum. Other factions, whether on the streets or within the university environment, trusted his leadership. They often reached out to him for guidance, believing that he had a better understanding of the game than most. Yaya's reign, however, did not last forever. Just like every leader before him, a time came when he had to step aside and hand over the mantle. His successor was a man known as Ziko, younger, ambitious, and with a very different outlook on leadership. That handover marked the beginning of a new era, one that would gradually reshape the identity of the Agbowo Forum. While Yoya had built a reputation on peace, calmness, and wisdom, the leadership of Ziko would soon test the stability Yoya had fought hard to maintain. When Yoya eventually handed over leadership, the Agbowo Forum entered a new phase under a man called Ziko. But unlike Yoya, whose calmness and maturity kept the group stable, Ziko represented the direct opposite. He was younger, more aggressive, and carried himself with a certain arrogance that quickly set him apart from his predecessor. Those who knew him at the time often described him as a bully, someone who thrived on intimidation rather than respect. Ziko's harshness was not only directed at outsiders or rival groups, even his own members were not spared. Any Black Axe member who failed to align with his orders or question his authority was quickly put in their place. Reports spread that he often used his influence to oppress others, and there were even accounts of him forcefully taking people's belongings to establish dominance. This style of leadership created tension within the forum. Many older members who had enjoyed Yaya's peaceful approach began to feel uncomfortable, while the younger ones were split between fear and admiration. What made matters worse was Ziko's close association with certain individuals from the Airlord Confraternity, a rival group with a long history of disputes with the Black Axe. While Yoya had always tried to keep relationships balanced and avoid unnecessary conflict, Ziko openly maintained friendships with some of the Airlords who shared his ambitions and thirst for power. This move raised eyebrows among his own members, many of whom saw it as a betrayal of the group's principles. The campus-based faction of the Black Axe, made up mostly of students from the University of Ibadan, was particularly displeased. They did not approve of Ziko's method of running things, as it went against the more strategic and disciplined outlook they were trying to maintain on campus. They criticized his heavy-handedness and reckless style, which they believed would only bring unnecessary attention and tension to the forum. Despite these growing internal divisions, Ziko continued to run the Agbowo Forum with his usual aggressiveness. But it wasn't long before his leadership faced its biggest test. A chain of events unfolded that would lead to one of the most heated confrontations between the Black Axe and the Airlords in that area. The clash began at a popular spot in the Agbowo community, the Agbowo shopping complex. This location, situated close to the University of Ibadan, was a common hangout spot for both students and street members alike. On the day of the incident, a group of Black Axe members from the university campus had gone to the shopping complex to relax, unaware that destiny was about to place them in direct contact with their long-standing rivals. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The campus members settled in, enjoying their time, but unknown to them, a small group of Airlord members was also present at the complex, stationed a little distance away. Both sides were unaware of the other's presence. The atmosphere was calm, with no reason to suspect that trouble was brewing. The spark that would ignite the storm came unexpectedly. One of the Black Axe members, a young man known as Pear, decided to step out briefly to get something. As fate would have it, his path crossed with the Airlord members. That moment of contact, seemingly ordinary, would turn into the trigger that set off a violent confrontation between the two groups. What followed after that encounter would go on to reshape the fragile peace that had existed under Yoya and plunge the Agbowo Forum into a cycle of conflict. When Pear stepped out from where his fellow Black Axe members were seated at the Agbowo shopping complex, he had no idea that trouble was waiting just a few meters away. Moving casually through the busy environment, he unexpectedly crossed paths with a squad of Airlord members who were also hanging around the complex that same evening. At first glance, they did not recognize him as a member of a rival group. To them, Pear looked like an ordinary passerby who had wandered too close into their space. What followed next, however, was a display of raw intimidation. The Airlords confronted him, surrounding him in a way that immediately asserted their dominance. In the confusion of that encounter, Pear's phone was seized from him without much explanation. For Pear, it was an embarrassing and frustrating experience, not only because of the loss of his possession but because of the manner in which he was treated. Shaken and agitated, Pear quickly returned to where his fellow Black Axe members were seated. Breathing heavily, he explained what had just happened, how the Airlords had accosted him and taken his phone. His words immediately stirred anger among his brothers. To them, it was not just about a phone, it was about respect. The incident had to be addressed immediately before it spiraled into something much worse. Without wasting time, some of the more recognized figures among the Black Axe members stood up and walked straight towards the Airlord group. Their goal was to confront the matter directly and recover Pear's phone. The atmosphere grew tense as the two groups came face to face in the heart of the complex. Voices were raised, hands moved in heated gestures, but surprisingly, the situation de-escalated faster than anyone expected. The Airlords, realizing that the young man they had earlier harassed was not just a random passerby but an actual member of the Black Axe, quickly softened their stance. They returned the phone to Pear and went as far as offering apologies, claiming that they had no knowledge of his identity at the time of the incident. To them, it had been a misunderstanding, one they did not intend to escalate. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the matter had been settled. But just when everyone thought peace had been restored, a new twist emerged. The leader of the Airlords present that day, a man known by the name Nero, decided to step forward. Instead of closing the issue and allowing both sides to disperse, Nero began issuing threats directly to the Black Axe members. His words were sharp and confrontational, filled with undertones of defiance. No one could really understand why he had chosen that moment to ignite more tension, especially after his men had already apologized and handed back the phone. Some speculated that Nero's outburst was not really about the phone at all, but rather something deeper, perhaps an attempt to assert authority, prove dominance, or remind the Black Axe members that the Airlords would not be disrespected in any way. Whatever his motive was, Nero's actions poured fuel on what could have remained a small misunderstanding. The argument quickly escalated. Harsh words gave way to physical pushes, and before long, the fragile peace at the shopping complex shattered completely. The heated confrontation between Nero's Airlord squad and the Black Axe members turned into an outright brawl, marking the beginning of a violent clash that would stain the history of Agbowo and drag both factions into open conflict. The confrontation at the Agbowo shopping complex took a dramatic turn when the heated argument between both groups finally spilled into physical combat. The Black Axe members, outnumbering their rivals and fighting with determination, quickly gained the upper hand. Nero, the Airlord leader who had sparked the escalation with his threats, was overwhelmed in the scuffle. Alongside his squad, he was severely beaten by the opposing group. Realizing the danger he was in, Nero managed to break free and fled the scene with his life, but the humiliation of that day would not be forgotten. The aftermath of the clash created deep cracks within the Black Axe itself. The university-based members, who had been directly involved in the incident, believed they had only defended themselves after Nero's reckless provocation. But to Zico, who was leading the Agbowo Street faction at the time, the entire episode was an unnecessary mistake. He felt the campus members were dragging the street forum into a dangerous conflict with the Airlords, one that could destabilize everything they had built in Agbowo. Tension rose sharply inside the Black Axe. On one side stood the campus members who insisted they had done nothing wrong. On the other stood Zico and the street faction, who feared that a war was now brewing. With emotions running high and accusations flying, it seemed the confraternity was about to split from within. It was at this point that Yoya, the respected former leader, stepped in once more. Known for his calmness and wisdom, he called both sides together and mediated peace between them. His presence reminded everyone of the stability he had once maintained. For a moment, it seemed as if the storm could be calmed. Both factions reluctantly agreed to put aside their grievances and focus on unity, largely out of respect for Yaya's influence and character. But fate had a cruel twist in store. Not long after this fragile peace was established, an Airlord hit squad went out into the city, hunting for Black Axe members in retaliation for the humiliation of Nero. By sheer misfortune, they ran into Yoya himself. The men, at first, had no intention of harming him. Their plan was to rob him as a way of sending a message and move on. They collected his phone, believing the act was enough. Yet Yoya, a man who had lived much of his life commanding respect, refused to allow himself to be humiliated. Stubborn and unwilling to let his possession go, he challenged them, demanding the return of his phone. What began as a simple robbery soon spiraled out of control. The hit squad grew impatient with his resistance, and in a fit of anger, they decided to silence him instantly. The fall of Yoya sent shockwaves across the city. News of his death spread quickly, and it marked the beginning of a full-blown war between the two rival groups. For the Black Axe, it was personal. Their pioneer leader, the man who had kept them stable and peaceful, had been taken down in cold blood. Revenge was inevitable. The first to fall in the chain of retaliations was an Airlord member known as Ihime, who was struck down in response to Yaya's killing. From that point onward, the violence intensified. One attack led to another, and the bloodshed spiraled beyond control. The two confraternities, once kept apart by Yaya's diplomacy, now engaged in open hostility, determined to even the score at every opportunity. In the midst of this chaos, Nero, the very man whose threats at the shopping complex had triggered the initial clash, became a marked target. Eventually, a Black Axe hit squad tracked him down, and his life ended in the same cycle of violence he had helped to ignite. Another Airlord, Debo, who was believed to have been directly involved in the downfall of Yoya, also met the same fate not long afterward. The streets of Agbowo and the surrounding communities descended into fear as both factions struck at each other, one after the other. What had begun with a single phone incident at the shopping complex had now grown into a conflict that consumed lives and shattered families. In the end, the story of Yoya, Ziko, Nero, and the rest stands as a grim reminder of what cultism and criminal activities bring: destruction, fear, and wasted lives. Nothing good has ever come out of such violence. Yaya's fall, and the chaos that followed, is proof that peace is always the better path. Let this story be a lesson: say no to cultism, say no to crime, say yes to peace. Only in peace can young people build a future worth living for.